Well, good day, everybody. Welcome to the OpenNTF webinar titled Getting Started with XPages. My name is Bruce Elgort, and I'll be one of the hosts today on the webinar. And I'm truly excited to bring to all of you two great developers, totally awesome developers, as well as great people. The first of those two is Mr. David Leedy, and the second is going to be Marky Roden. So just before I let David loose on you guys, and Marky as well, I just want to let you know that we want you to post any questions that you have. Now, during the webinar, place them in the chat. Don't wait till the end. Let's get those questions in there so we can tally them up and ask the speakers at the end, okay? So again, post your questions in the chat, and we'll get those answered for you. So enough of me, and on to David Leedy.
Well, thanks, Bruce, and thanks, everybody, for joining us. Pleasure to be here. Just a brief introduction about me is my name's Dave Leedy. I'm a corporate developer, like probably many of you guys. I'm not a business partner. I just do this to help give back what I've learned, and I do that mostly through my site called Notes in 9, which is a video screencast, which has I honestly don't know. I think I'm up to around 30 hours of tips and videos and techniques on XPages learning. And I've gotten many great contributors on the show. Marky is one of them, and some other guys in the chat and girls for Kathy have been on the show, and that's kind of what I do. So off to you, Marky.
Good morning. My name is Marky Roden. I work for the PSC Group based out of Chicago. I have been very enthusiastically blogging about jQuery and other web frameworks to do with XPages for about 18 months. And I am very honored to be here today and looking forward to talking about XPages.
Okay, so I'm going to switch over to a different slide deck. And again, what the goal of this is a getting started with XPages session. So I can already tell that there are some people in the chat that are pretty advanced, but maybe there'll be something you can pick up. But we're gearing this for people who are pretty much new to XPages or just getting started, and we want to get over get a comfort zone and things like that. So let me hit next here, and again, there's Marky, there's me. We went over that. Okay, so XPages. Well, what is XPages? XPages is a series of design elements meant to modernize Domino web development. So it's new tooling that came in 8.5, I believe it was, and Loaster of 2009, and it's been enhanced. Every version since it's been significantly enhanced throughout its lifespan so far, with no end in sight. It's built on top of Java server faces, which is a technology they use. And there's a couple things about that. One is you don't need to know Java. The purpose of XPages design elements is to protect you from Java server faces. But it's kind of cool where you can now say you're working with Java server faces, which you are. So if Domino is kind of like a nasty name in your environment or so, you can start using additional technology buzzwords, which might be a little more sugar-coated, I guess. It has Dojo JavaScript framework is built in, which is a popular, it's not as popular as jQuery, but there's some advantages to it. It's built right into the product to give us advanced capabilities. And again, you're using standard languages now. You're going to use HTML. You're going to use CSS, to help control your presentation and display on your screen. JavaScript is the language of choice in XPages, really. It's kind of your Lotus script, really. And you can get into Java, but you don't have to actually do that, certainly not starting out. You can integrate other open source projects. So all these people out there have contributed a lot of code to the internet. One of the big ones is jQuery. It's a great JavaScript framework. Twitter Bootstrap is a very popular user interface framework to help you lay out your screen and stuff like that. And many more can just be integrated right inside of XPages.
But XPages is not really that different. It's still Domino underneath. and all of the reasons and all the advantages why we use it are still there, still valid. You know, you've got your basic database with templating, your security model, readers fields, authors fields, forms, views, replicating, offline capabilities. It's all there. So none of that has changed. And you could continue to use 8.5 or 9 and write your databases without using XPages at all. I mean, all that functionality is still there in the system. XPages makes it better, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So just to ground some of you in some of the terms we're going to use today and give you a mental map of what we're going to be talking about. In the XPages world, the user puts their information in through an XPage, not a notes form. And on the XPage, we have custom controls, not subforms. They work differently, but they serve a similar purpose in that you can compute them onto the form, you can have multiple ones of them, and you can put all of the functionality you want on different subforms, custom controls, and you can reuse the custom controls. And instead of using the view and the document out of the box, we now use them as a data source to feed the data from the views and the documents into our custom controls and XPages.
Okay, so while there's a lot that's the same, there is some things that are different, obviously, and XPages, I believe, requires you to kind of approach it a little differently than you ever have before, just because we have new capabilities that we never had before. So, for instance, data binding. So in XPages, it's really easy to separate your source code from your data. So more often than not, I'm inclined to have an NSF file that has no data in it whatsoever, and it just has the XPages source code, and it could bind to 2 databases. You could be working with 5 databases. You know, in some cases, you could be working with 65,000 databases, all from one NSF source code. So what that kind of means is there's no need to really rip and replace. You know, you can have an existing notes client or download application and start an XPage application on the side that just kind of like reaches in and uses the views and data that you have in there. And now you're adding web pages and advanced functionality that you couldn't do maybe safely, or you didn't want to just touch the production code. So you don't have to rip and replace. You can just reuse what's there. But you might actually want to rip and replace in some cases, because you can change your data modeling. And we're going to talk about this later on, but you can now do lookups inside a view, basically. So it allows you to get a little more relational in your database, which might be a little more view-friendly and some other things. So there are advantages to basically starting over as well, but it's not a requirement. Another key tool that we have, which is near and dear to my heart, is the repeat control. The repeat control is like a view on steroids. It's you can take a view data or any kind of array data, maybe a multi-value field, and then you can present it on the screen without any predefined format restrictions. So you can make it look however you want. You can make it look like a table, you know, like Excel. You can make it look like a business card. You can do anything else you want with it. Other benefits we get inside of XPage itself, which we never really had before, is the ability for this Dojo integration, which gives us, you know, date picker capability. It gives us a partial refresh, so we can refresh just a little piece of the screen, and pagers. I mean, how hard is it to do a pager in a classic Domino web site? Well, I don't know how hard it is because I never quite figured it out myself, but it's pretty hard, I hear. And then, of course, we get scope variables. And scope variables are this great way to share between pages and to just work with in-memory objects. So in scope variables, it really eliminates the need to use cookies or URL parsing to pass data from a page to another. Now, you still might want to do some URL parsing because you can bookmark a URL. You can't really bookmark a scope variable, so just keep that in mind. But there's 4 different scopes right now, and you even have the ability to make your own if you get more advanced with it. But the first one is application scope, and that's available to all users and has a very long life. So that's a great place for what you may have used a database configuration profile document for, you know, just general settings or so that would apply to everybody. Session scope is an area in memory that you can put values in there that's just for the user. reference for the life of their user session. So that would be a great example of a shopping cart, for instance. Use scope is more the life of the page for the single user, and I use that like for search boxes a little bit, and you'll see that in the demo. But so if I type in a search thing and I update my page with a partial refresh, and then I navigate away from that page and back, I want that view scope to be clear and just start over again. Typically, if I didn't want it to start over again, then I use session scope. And then there's request scope, which I've never honestly quite really figured out because it's really a short lifespan. So that's request scope.
So one of the things we wanted to do was to show you some of the things that we've always wanted to do pre-XPages with our Domino websites, but there were limitations that, we all coded around to the best of our abilities. And one of the most powerful ones from a developer's perspective is the ability to recompute and refresh any section on the page, and you have control over it. So what we're looking at right now is we're looking at the XPages, the Domino Designer in Eclipse, which Dave will show us in more detail in a bit when he does his demo. But he just wanted to show that in the on-click event of an element, you can then refresh any other element. So pre-XPages, we were able to cause the refresh in an on-change event of a drop-down. And we could programmatically do it in other places by using that kind of code, but it was a little kludgy. Now we have complete control over everything from the entire page down to a panel, down to a field. Anything you want, you have control over, and you can recompute on the back end. All the field bindings are retained. All the data that the users entered is retained. It is an extremely powerful capability. Web file management is another huge bonus that we can do in XPages. If you're adding external frameworks to your Domino application, you used to have to add each file individually as a file resource, whether it was an image or a file, a CSS, or a JavaScript library. Each one of them had to be added individually, which became a bit of a nightmare to manage. We now have the Web Contents folder within the Package Explorer, within your database, and you can drag and drop external frameworks into the Web Content folder, and all of the links that need the folder structure are automatically managed for you. It makes life considerably easier, and you can also manage everything in one place rather than having to move around and scroll up and down in the file resources area. Next. Within your XPages or within your custom controls, you can pretty much compute anything at any time, including during the partial refreshes. So not only are you able to do hide whens on a row like we used to be able to do, you can now compute whether something or not something is visible down to the field level on a row. And actually, as you can see on the picture on the right, what we're actually looking at there is actually an attribute of a div on the page can be computed. So if this particular div is in edit mode, we can load an attribute giving it a class. So down to the most discrete level, we can compute and control everything on the page, which again gives us so much more flexibility than we had before to be able to make the application meet the requirements and the needs of our customers.
Okay, and also what we've always wanted is a prettier experience right out of the box without having to do anything. Just give us a better ability for free. In the old classic Domino web, or so you rendered a view to the or a form to the browser. It worked, but it's kind of ugly. But now, right outside the box, we have this framework called One UI, and we have tools to allow us to use it. And that allows us to place our text in different places on the screen. It gives us, different widgets and things to start with, and it allows us to make prettier apps quicker without having to become an expert on CSS. So obviously, the more you learn about CSS, the better it is for customization, or if you want to go on your own. Okay, so what do you get out of the box? Well, it comes with core controls, which was part of 850 and 851, et cetera. So, but then they came out with the extension library, which started life as an OpenNTF project. And now the extension library is kind of wrapped up into 3 different flavors. If you're running pre-Domino 9, you have the choice of an actual upgrade pack, which is supported by IBM software, or you could run the actual extension library that you download from OpenNTF. If you've made it to Domino 9, then most of the extension library from the upgrade pack has been bug fixed, and there's been some improvements and incorporated right into the core product. So there's nothing else to install unless you want to use some of the experimental features like there's RDBMS integrations and social toolkit or so. So depending on the version that you have, depends on your choices. And I would just personally say, and I'm sure some business partners would disagree with me, always use the extension library. I'm not a fan of the upgrade pack because they don't bug fix it. There's a long wait between upgrade pack 1 and Domino 9, where bug fixes did come out for the extension library. But that's between you and your administrators and your organization. Just always use the extension library because it's better. So the extension library includes the one UI, the framework that's easy to use, and the application layout control. So we're going to see that in the demo. Other things that we wanted in our development capability is an easier way to get to the source, basically, because it's kind of tedious to use the graphical designer. Depending on what you're doing, if you're updating lots of fields or so, there's a lot of advantage. You're just going to basically a text-based editor for your source. That's what a lot of other programs and platforms just live in. They just live in text, and it's nothing to be afraid of. Now, I've got source in quotes here because, okay, it's not the real source when you're in that source tab and you're editing your XML, because the true source all gets compiled into Java. But again, it's designed to protect you from Java as much as you want to be protected from it. So it's called the source tab. I kind of call it the XML source, and it really does save time and effort. It's not something to be afraid of, especially if you ever want to get into mobile controls and some of the other advanced extension library things. We now have the ability for RDBMS capability. So, in the old days, you'd have to have like a Windows server with ODBC drivers and stuff installed on it. Well, now you can get native JDBC drivers from your database of choice, whether it's DB2 or Oracle or whatever else. And then your Domino server or your XWorks server can talk to that data source on whatever platform you're running on, Windows or in one of the Linux players. You have the ability to build custom objects. Okay, now this I should put the word Java in there, but that's kind of what I'm talking about. How nice would it have been in the Notes client development world to have a global object that spanned forms, so you moved around and it was just always there, whether it's a company object or something like that. Well, you can do that now by combining some objects built in Java, most likely, although you can kind of fake it with JavaScript, and putting them in a scope, like an application or a session scope. They live with you as you go from page to page, and it's a beautiful thing. Trust me on that. We also now can all integrate other people's code. We talked about the frameworks. Well, here's a little more specific example of the Apache Koi project, which allows you to make PDFs, and binary Excel files. You can read that stuff in. And even other people in the community have their own Java libraries. One that's working with OpenNTF is the org.opentf.domino project, and that's a new API that tries to improve on the rather dated current Domino Java API and make things a little easier for you to digest by taking away some of the Java scariness, like recycling. Okay, so with that being said, we're gonna go to a demo here if I can figure out how to do it. And I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share my entire screen. And I really, really wanted to do a live build start from scratch, and I realized I didn't have that kind of time. So this is going to be a more of a kind of like half build, half kind of like walkthrough or so. So I'm going to work with this fake names app, which I've used a lot on the show. And all this is a database of like 50,000 names, and you can see some views. there's nothing of interest here from the client perspective, right? So it's just fields, and it's not designed to be used for a in the Notes client. Okay, so if we come over here to Designer, we're going to look at it from the design, and here's the first form. So again, all we care about in an XPages application is the field. Nothing else matters. So I like to put tables on here in some of my applications for documentation, describe what the fields do, etc. But this is just going to define the data that we're going to store. So we still use forms, and we still use views. So if we look here at a view, there's nothing different about this view. Okay, I will tell you the first gotcha that I'm going to tell you today is some of these view columns, if you compute them, they may not show up, and I kind of forget the rules on that or so, but depending on how that's computed, you may not be able to pick those next pages, and that's really kind of a pain in the butt. So just because you have a view column here, it doesn't necessarily mean XPages can see it all the time. Okay, so let's get into the application a little bit here, and what I'm going to do is wonder why I don't have a home page here. Oh, because that's the wrong application. So this is the data part of it. So I'm going to come in here to my webinar application, and I've got a home page. And I'm just going to quickly show you a little bit about what's going on here, and then we're going to talk about some different things. Okay, so again, this is the One UI framework, okay, which is an easy way to get a title bar here. We've got a left sidebar, and we've got a content area. And as we click on different areas, we're updating our content area, okay? And that's all there is to it in this case. So how do we build some of that? How do we get this layout running and working and stuff like that? Well, we have this concept of an X page, and we have this concept of a custom control. And what a lot of people did starting out, I was one of them, I think Declan was another one, and Matt White and stuff, is we never worked on X pages when we were starting out. We did everything with a custom control, and then we put that into an X page. So we basically had a custom control per X page. Well, you don't really need to do that. If it's really not going to be reusable, then you can actually code right on a custom control. So I'm going to show you how to do that here, and I'm going to show you this layout custom control, and we're going to rebuild this basically on the side here. I'm going to show you how I built this and controlled it. So what we're going to do here is we're going to make a new custom control, layout name 2, and I'm going to say OK. And what this is going to do, this is going to drive the layout of the screen, okay, all that One UI stuff. And that's called the application layout control. And here's our first little instance of a wizard. So we click on OK, and it's there, and it's ready to go. Now, here's the most important thing going on in this screen to me. These green dots, okay? So these are important. What these are called, sometimes they're called editable areas, sometimes they're called facets, sometimes I think they're called callback areas or something like that. So we can drag content onto this, other controls onto this right now. And if we drag something onto one of these green dots right now, it will be available on every page where we use it. But we don't want to drag our content onto this now because we want to reuse this layout custom control. So over here is this little documentation section of enable drop target. So I'm gonna click here, and it's going to take the green dot away, and it's going to give it to me later. When I put this on a page, that green dot will come back. So what I did when I created my layout is I came in here and I updated a little bit here, layout 2, and I found my Navigator because I wanted the Navigator to be on each page. If I didn't want the Navigator to be on each page, if I wanted a separate Navigator per page, then I would have enabled this as a drop target for later like I did here. So now a Navigator is on, and Navigators are pretty easy. It's just a matter of adding items to it, okay? And most commonly, you're going to use page link nodes. So I know this is kind of a bad resolution, it just works the best for video. So if I say my page, again, we're just going to do this really kind of quickly to show you how the concepts of it. Okay, so now I've got a custom control with one item on it. Okay, but you can't launch a custom control and see it in the browser. You have to put an X page. So I'm going to make a new X page, called temp1. And the first thing I'm going to do now is put this custom control on this. Okay, now what this is going to let me do is every page that I drag this on is going to give me my framework. Now I get my green dot back, and rather than making a custom control and dragging that on there, I can code right on this page. And the way I usually do that is I just drop a panel in because he wants to have a panel there, and my new page. And I can save this and preview this. And I've got my layout. There's the title I put in. Here's the menu options, which goes back to the other one. And that's how I did the basic layout for this small demo. Okay, so I guess I have to slow down because the refresh isn't going up there. So we'll try and do that. But sorry about that. Okay, so that is a working with the layout. Now, when you're working with this layout, I'm going to go back to the real one. Is you do have all these different areas. You've got this banner, you've got this application links, utility links. Now, One UI is very well documented. I don't think we have a link in the slides yet, but you can kind of probably Google for One UI documentation and see what all these things do. There are nodes. There's a login, logout node. Now, I didn't use this because my server isn't using custom-based authentication for some reason, and I have to fix that. But I think that does require session-based authentication because it didn't show up. I tried it. But it is there, and it does work. I believe there used to be a bug in the early extension library, but that's been fixed now. So that is basically getting the layout in there. So now what I'd like to do is talk about, actually doing something of interest. And we're going to look at this Demo 1 page. And all this is a view, a view from an external database. Now we've got a pager, and it works. There's nothing clickable on here yet, but we've got a view. So how do we build a view to an external database? Okay, well, if I look at if I'm in my page, and again, it's a small screen resolution, but don't ever miss this outline. Outline rocks. Okay, that allows you to easily get through your screen. I'm going to make sure I'm on this X page, and then I'm going to look at all my properties. Okay, and the first one I'm going to look at is data. It comes up. So this is great, and Mark talked about this, is you can compute anything in XPages, just about. So what have I done is I'm saying I'm going to use this formula. And there's a couple of formulas you can use to get to it. This is kind of like an old school formula. But this isn't that hard. This looks like at formula language because it really is at formula language with just a few little odds and ends to make it compatible. So that's our database formula. And then because we're computing the database, we have to compute the name. So I'm going to use the by name, okay? But here's the kicker, okay? Normally, you can take the view control and drag it in here, and a wizard's going to appear and give you all the columns. You can choose the column. But you can't do that when you compute a database. So that's kind of disappointing. So, but you can cheat. So the way I like to cheat is when I want to use a view control like that, is I will go back into the original database, and I will make just a new X page, which doesn't even need to be saved. And then here, I will come in and I will find my view. And now I'll use the wizard, say by name, and then I'll select which ones I want, whatever they are, and I say OK. And I think this takes a second or two just because it's such a big database. I'm not working off templates here. Okay, so I've got my view here, and now I'm going to go into source. So we've been working in the IDE designer, and I'm going to go into source, and here's all the XML code that makes up that view. And all I really did was I copied this, and then again, I don't need to save that XPage. I mean, it saves automatically, but not the update. And then I came back down to my demo 1 page, and I came into source, and I just pasted it right here. Okay, so that got me my view. Now I believe I had to do a minor tweak to it to basically say that I was using the view that I've already predefined on this page. But that's what allowed me to easily integrate this data from another database. Okay, and we'll take questions at the end if there are any questions. Now, let's look at that. Now we're going to look at, save that. We're going to look at demo 2. Make sure I'm on the right database here. And in demo 2, I did something else here. I turned on filtering. Okay, so I can, as I type, I can actually do something. I also have a new button. I've got a delete button. So I now have CRUD. I can click on new. And yeah, this is ugly, but we could have made it look nicer. I can click cancel. I can save items. I can click on an item and delete it. It says, are you sure? And I say, yeah, I'm sure. And I would have to log in for that because that's not the ACL apparently. So let's see how those things work, and we can even fix the ACL. We're going to go back to Designer. And first on the ACLs work the same way as they always have before. Okay, that does look right. So, okay, we're just going to punt on that one. But you can delete. It does work, trust me on that. So how did we get that filtering to work? So I'm going to go back again and look at my outline. And here's the X page. And remember, I'm computing this data, okay? But there's additional things you can compute. We can filter by column value, okay? And what are we going to do here? This is our first use of a scoped variable. So I'm basically just saying whatever is in the view scope variable name VS filter, I'm going to basically filter by that value, okay? Well, how do I get anything into that view scope variable VS filter? Okay, I drop an edit box on here, and you've got different binding options. You don't have to just bind to a Domino document. You can bind to a lot of different things, and I'm just telling you to bind to a view scope VS filter, and that's pretty much it. Then that's how you can get anything into scope. Now to get that like live typing business, I'm going to do on key up just a partial update. Again, this is what Marky talked about, that you can refresh anything. And I'm telling you, every time that key presses up, I'm going to send a partial refresh to this part of the screen, this view control. And then that view control uses the server. It's a round trip to the server, but it re-renders, and it sends back just the pieces that it deems have been updated. And that's how that works. Now, I do just want to point out here, because I'm trying to show you as much as I can, if we go to our X page again, you're not just limited to this pretty pane of items. I mean, there's so many properties in here for your X page, okay? So I do want to point out, like, attributes here is, and let's do that on field first. This is a place where you can add HTML attributes. I'm doing a lot more with different frameworks and stuff like that, so you can put a name and a value here, like data role and web or whatever they are. So don't be afraid of going to this all properties from this part of the screen. So if we come down here, just to show you a little more to it, I can actually see all the properties for my view. And again, you can have more than one data source on your page at a time, which we never could do before. So in this view, you can basically see where the database name is, the keys. You know, if we want to do some different things with expand levels, events, you know, different searching or so. So there's a lot here you can get into. So I've never memorized. I use the source more than I ever had before, but I've not memorized it. So I only use it when I actually need to do it. But keep in mind that there is this all properties section here. Okay. Now I've got a couple buttons here. I've got a clear button. I dropped this clear button on. So what does that do? I didn't demo, but it clears the value and restores the view to its natural state. All that is an event, and I use a script editor, server-side JavaScript, and I'm just putting a blank in for that value of view filter, and then I'm doing a partial update. New is a little different. I'm going to use a simple action. There's a lot of simple actions in XPages, and you can do a fair amount with it. So in this case, there's just a simple action called open page. And I'm telling you what the name of the page to open. This is the name of my X page. I can do new. I can open a document. And if I want to open a specific document, I can compute the unit to it. And I can put it right in edit mode as well too. So don't be afraid to use simple actions. Now, in a big application, they're probably not the most performant things in the world, but they're easy to get started. So why not use them until you need to use something else? The delete button works the same way. There's an option in here to delete selected documents. From where? The view name. So my view panel 1, and I can even put confirmation text in there. Then to get the checkboxes, and all I needed to do is go into this first column and go on properties and display, and I did checkbox. I also did show these values as links. And somewhere in here, down the columns on the view itself. Let me see, this is where it helps to have your panel there. I've selected the view. So in here, I'm saying at runtime, there's an option also on the view panel to say open selected document using, you can have whatever form, or not whatever form, whatever X page you want. And I told it to use my XPerson X page. So again, if we look at this, and too much here, but just close that and try it one more time. So I didn't break it. Okay, so again, we have these links that work. So there's a fair amount of functionality here, and not a lot of code, right? So which is kind of a nice thing. If we want to look at our XPerson, obviously I broke it here at some point, but we'll move on. We're done with that. So if we look at our XPerson form, or not form, X page, we've got save and cancel buttons in here. And if I look at that, we have options to open previous page, so that goes back to the previous page, etc. Okay, I'm running low on time here, so I've got one last thing I do want to show you on custom controls. Is I made a custom control here, I put on here, called HeaderValue, all right? And this custom control is, I'm passing properties at runtime. So I'm going to delete this. And if I were to drag this back in, not this one here, let me just put it anywhere. There's a custom property. So I can name it at this time whatever I want it to be, right? Okay, so how does that custom control work? Well, inside the custom control, I dropped a computed text control on here. But how did I get it big? Well, this is a great thing about Source. Is you can just type HTML right in Source. So things we don't have controls for, like field sets, etc. There isn't anything in here. So you can just surround what your content with a field set or an H1 tag or whatever you want. And then how do I pass that parameter in? Well, all you need to do is make under property definition, make new property, tag, name it whatever you want. And then how do you access anything that gets in there? Through an object called Composite Date. And so the value of this computer control is basically just composite data. It gives you type ahead, and then header string. And then that's how you pass on. So now I've styled this element, and I can reuse it on every page that I want to, just by passing a parameter in. And if I want to change the styling, then H2, I just go down here, and it'll update for everything. Okay, so we got some more slides to come in here. So we're gonna go back to the slides if I can find my screen. And I'm having a problem finding it. There it is. So I'm going to stop sharing this. I know that was a rushed demo, but I just wanted to show you some things that a lot of people miss about data binding and custom controls and how you get that layout started. So with that being said, we're going to start talking about tools that you need, and Marky will go over that.
Thanks, Dave. From version 8.5, Domino Designer is now based on Eclipse. And because we are in Eclipse, that gives us a number of nice features that we did not have in pre-XPage, pre-8.5 Domino Designer. One of the things that you should do before you start, though, is because Eclipse is a Java application, is increase the JVM memory. I'm not going to go into why. You've got the link on the presentation here. Just, you should do it. It will make your life a lot easier. Within Eclipse, we have local history. When it's enabled, what it allows you to do is it allows you to go back and look in time at almost your own source control. So when you realize that you just destroyed a page and saved it by mistake, you can go back and you can look at the local history and you can pull back what you had this morning, yesterday, the day before. It really is a lifesaver. You can add to-do tracking into this system. So in your code, you type to-do, and you can come back later and you can reference where you were yesterday, personal pointers. You can customize the perspective. So all the different panels that Dave was using in his demonstration, you can move them around the screen for whatever kind of visual person you are. You have the control over what you are using in Designer. You have the ability to do source control integration. We're not going to go into it today, but because we now have source code, we can truly use source control, which is a huge benefit, especially when working in a team, to be able to manage the code base. Out of the box, you have a search and replace. You can actually go into the application, search for your information, and it will actually search across all of the applications that you have open. And as you can see from the screen here, it will actually show you which particular element it's found the match in, whether it's a custom control, XPage, whether it's a JavaScript library, and it will replace in all of them. It's extremely powerful and very helpful. So some of the tools that we use as web developers, really, that are definitely going to help you in your transition to XPages, because I think it's important to have an understanding of how your XPages are created from a website perspective. And each of the modern browsers that we now have developer tools in them, whether it's Firebug for Firefox, Chrome developer tools, IE developer tools, and there are also debug tools that we can use. Use these tools to debug our code. And we're going to look at Firebug briefly, but what we can do in Firebug, you can also do in Chrome and IE developer tools. On this screen, you can see that I've actually highlighted one of the pieces of code within the application. And from that, what we are then able to do is we're able to then manipulate that information without having to go back to our database and build it. So if you go to the next one, Dave, you can actually, as you can see here, I've modified the CSS, and I've turned all the text red, and I've done that in the browser. So what this allows you to do is it allows you to interact with the page, make modifications to it, decide how you want it to look, and then go back to the database. So instead of having the age-old process of make a change, save it, show it, make a change, save it, show it. We now can do it in real time, make the changes, and once we're happy with them, we only make the change to the application once. You also have the ability to inject and modify your JavaScript code. So if you have a function that's not working properly, then using Firebug or the other tools, you can actually write your JavaScript functions, client-side JavaScript functions, into the console, into the Firebug itself, and you can make your client-side validation work and then put it back in your code. Next. Within 8.5 and above, we have a Java debugger. Within 9, we have a server-side Java debugger. That is the equivalent of the Lotus scripts debugger that we've all used for years and years. The server-side JavaScript debugger is a fantastic tool and significantly increases your productivity because you're able to find the problems rather than having to change and save and do an alert or a log or anything like that. Dave has a Notes in 9 shows done by Frederick Norling, and you should go check it out.
In addition to that, there's a Debug Tool Bar that Mark Lusink did. It's available on OpenNTF, and that is a great way to see what your scope variables look like at a time. There's logging capability built in. There's an API inspector. It's very full-featured, and we've got a couple screenshots here of showing some things which are too small on my screen to see. But you can direct error pages to it. It's highly recommended for you to check that out, integrate that in your projects. And keep in mind that OpenNTF does have an importer, too, that you can automatically import this into new, you can import it into NSFs, you can't import it into NTFs for some reason, but you can import it into any NSF. Okay, so there's a learning curve. Right, Marky?
Yes, and this kind of new technology is always scary to an extent, and especially if you are a Notes client developer who not only has never developed a web page but has never developed an XPage. So where do you learn? What is the order? And people tell you, oh, you've got to learn Java. You don't. You could have a very successful career in XPages, never write a line of Java. You don't need to. And what we've laid out here is what we think is kind of the learning curve that you need to get into to be able to make great XPages. You need to understand HTML and XML first, because that is the model that everything is built on. After that, JavaScript syntax, server-side and client-side, it is important to know. There are lots of examples out on the web that you can copy and paste, but when you want to move on to your own things, that's what you're going to need to know. You then need to make your websites look pretty using CSS. You can use One UI, but if you want to go beyond that, then you need to understand how CSS works. And then finally, Java. Java can make your applications better, but it's certainly not necessary for beginners.
Okay, this is one of my personal favorites. Is the best way to start is with low pressure, because it's hard. I mean, it's not easy. If it was easy, we'd all be doing it, or we'd be doing it a lot sooner. So start with a low-pressure project. Don't go right into production. Start with something that you have some breathing space on. And whether you start with a new application that's maybe a vacation tracker or something like that, or you're just adding a couple pieces of data or a couple pieces of functionality to an existing application. Do it on the side. Maybe it's a skunk project or so, but start with low pressure. You'll be a lot better off in the long run. For some additional resources, I use this on my show a lot. There's a ton of resources now compared to when XPages came out in 2009. OpenNTF has so many great projects and custom controls. XPages info is kind of like the home spot, and it aggregates a lot of news content and blog posts. If you've got a question, go to Stack Overflow. Over 1,300 questions have been asked, and many will have been answered by then. There's an XPages forum, and there's even some paid content. I've got a lot of Notes 9 content out there. You can see these links. And in the slide, I'm just going to go through these really quickly. There's just some rookie mistakes that you can run into, so you can follow this along later. One of the big ones is you're writing client-side code inside a service script event. Okay, the server side does not access the DOM of the browser. It doesn't really talk to the browser event model and stuff like that. You need client-side for that. The same thing is don't go into the server-side tab, and you can see there, and try to put an alert in there. It's not gonna do well. Multiple bindings of documents. So when you bind into custom controls, you only want to have, when you end up with an X page, you only want to have one binding for your document there. You don't want to put a binding on each custom control. Then now you've got an X page with the same document bound 3 times. So it's going to ruin your day. Trust me. A big one that talking about data binding is I showed you the all properties in there, and you can have a scope to your document data binding. By default, the scope is view, and that works fine and dandy unless you're doing a purchase order application. You're doing a new line item after a new line item after a new line item, and each line item, you save the first one, you go to make another one, and the first one comes back. Well, you can go into all properties there and change that document scope to request scope. That's one of the places I actually use request scope, and then it will work as you expect it to be. Hiding things, I use a lot of nested panels. I use an outer panel and an inner panel. You cannot do a partial refresh on something that doesn't exist. So just keep that in mind. So I do an outer panel that always exists, and then an inner panel which kind of comes and goes, and I refresh the outer panel. And with that, you can find out the rest of these in the slides, and we're going to open it up to questions, I believe. Any questions?
All right, Dave, Bruce here. I got a whole bunch of questions that were asked in the chat, so let's start with those, and then we'll see where we go, all right? So we have a question from David. David asked, do you need to install the extension library upgrade pack 1 onto all Notes clients that will use the XPages app that you develop?
If you're running it inside the Notes client, yes. Now, the terminology is you have the upgrade pack or the extension library pretty much. But if you're going to run it locally, then in the what we call XPages in the Notes client, then yeah, you're going to have to install that at that level.
Okay, thank you, David. And we have another question. What was the POI project that you spoke of during the webinar, David? POI.
It's called POI, I think, or at least that's what Calhoun pronounces it. It's
Paul Calhoun, that is.
Paul Calhoun. It's a project of free code under Apache license. You can do anything with it. And I've used iText, which is a similar project, though it has worse licensing, to make PDF files. So you can use the Apache Point project, I believe, not only to make PDF files, I believe it does PDF as well, but it can make an Excel binary file. So it's very powerful. You can read and write most of the popular Microsoft Office format. And you can use that in Java itself, or you can kind of integrate some server-side JavaScript as well, I believe.
Okay.
Yes, instead of creating an Excel file by cheating and doing a CSV file, and then when you open it, you get the pop-up that says this was not created in the right place, you can actually create a true Excel file with POI, and that annoying prompt that users hate isn't there anymore.
And POI does not do PDF; it just does the Microsoft flavors. There's another Apache project for PDFs, and
so it's a native XLS file, a native Excel file.
Correct.
It's just like to allow you to make binary Microsoft compatible documents from your web applications.
Okay. Got 3 more questions that were asked in the chat, and then we'll see if we have time for more. And that another one from David B., which was, if I develop an app which includes controls from the extension library, can an end user use the app without having the extension library installed, or can it just be installed on the server?
If you use a web browser, just run the server, then there's nothing to install.
There you go. Okay. David, I hope that answered your question. If not, just post something in the chat and we'll pick that up. I got a question from Chad, and Chad asks, I'm creating a single page form. Do I need to create a custom control, or can I just put everything on a new X page? this is a common question. Mark or Marky or David?
And the answer is it depends. You don't have to. You can put everything you want on your XPage. But just like we used to use subforms that could be reused on multiple forms, if you're going to have content, as Dave showed in his demo, that is going to be able to be reused on multiple forms, you're better off building them once on a custom control and then adding them individually to each of your XPages. Not only will it help you manage your code better, but it will also decrease the amount of code that you have to manage.
Okay.
When I use a single page form, here's what you have to watch out for there, because I use that a lot with mobile controls, because the XPage mobile controls is a single page app. So you can do everything on a single XPage or so, but it can get too big. And Designer tries to render a lot of stuff that you might not care about rendering in the Designer experience. So if you do use custom controls, you actually have the ability, it's kind of right near the property definition, where it's called design definition or so, is you can actually set the content of how it should render in Designer and just set it to like some text or so. So then Designer won't actually try to render your code. It'll just say, you know, the name of your control or whatever you have put in there. There's examples of that on OpenNTF. And I had a lot of problems with a mobile control app that just got too big. And when I started doing that, I got a lot of speed and performance back. So if I guess the XPage may only really be able to hold so much without slowing down some performance, and then you can use custom controls to break that up just to make it play nice with Designer.
Yeah. Cool. Got a few more questions. Let's see if we can squeeze them in. So Vijay asks, do we need to concentrate on the XML namespace? And Vijay, I'm not sure what you're asking on that question. So Marky or David, do you?
I'm a little iffy on that. I think I saw him in post on the XPages forum or so. I mean, you do have namespaces like XEs for the extension library, and you can build your own or so. I don't give it too much thought, quite honestly. The only time that I really bump into namespace is if I copy code from an extension library element, you know, through source copy and paste, and I paste it in. If that namespace for XE is not up there, it doesn't know what to do with that XE. So usually when that happens, I just drag something from the extension library onto my page. It adds it, and I just remove it, and then I'm happy and it's happy.
All right.
So
go ahead, Marky.
Unless you are going to build your own custom controls, and by that I mean actually a Java plugin to truly build your own drag and droppable custom controls, you probably don't need to worry about the namespaces. Pretty much the designer will take care of it for you.
There you go. And Vijay, I know you just posted that in the chat, and Marky just answered that. That was really good timing. So we'll see if we can squeeze one more in here. As developer, we always start off with a notes template file, which we develop locally and test locally and use tools for source control, promotions, etc. Can you do the same thing with XPages, or do you need to use an NSF file initially? And he also asked, I hope that made sense.
If you're using source control, you're doing it right. Okay, I use it at the day job. I use it on my personal projects. It's a great place to be. I use templates all the time. So I use NTF files all the time. Now, if I'm just starting out, you know, I might go the lazy way and maybe start with an NSF for a little bit, just for that, you know, that big initial testing and stuff like that. It's just a little more convenient to just have an NSF on the server and program live. But before too long, then I always turn it into an NTF and then assign it to source control. So you can certainly do and use NTFs just like you always have before.
Okay.
I would also add on to that, one thing that is very different in XPages rather than old Domino is that you do not have design element locking. And what that means is, and you have to be very careful about this, and we don't have time to go into it today, but we certainly need, there's information out there on the web about it. And if you want more information, please feel free to contact me or Dave about it. But if you have multiple developers who are all working on the same database, there is a considerably high risk of you overwriting each other's code. And it's more of the nature of the way that XPages is now pre-compiled than in old Domino, where everything is compiled at runtime and all we have is really the form element. When you build the code in Designer, it's built on your machine. When you replicate that back up to the server, your build is replicated. So if you don't have the code that somebody else just replicated up to the server, and you build locally and replicate up, your build is what becomes on the server, not the code that they just put there. So there are things that you need to know about working in a team that the process will have to change. But the principle of you can still work locally is absolutely fine. Yes, you can. There are just some slightly different process rules that you need to learn and follow.
Okay. And the last thing, Amit asks something regarding mobile app development, and there are plenty of tools by third-party providers that allow you to develop notes-based XPages apps and deploy them to other devices like Android, iOS, etc. So ask Google. Google's your friend. So we're going to wrap it up for the webinar today, and I'd really like to have everyone give a virtual round of applause and thanks to both David Leedy and Marky Roden, because we couldn't do these webinars without people like them. David, your Note to 9 video series, which I posted in the chat and will also post on the blog entry, is something that developers around the world have come to love and truly appreciate, so thank you for doing that. And Marky, your Zomino blog stuff on jQuery, XPages, JavaScript is also phenomenal. So thank you both.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us on.
So that's a wrap for the OpenNTF webinar. Hope you enjoyed this. If you enjoyed today's webinar, tweet about it, Facebook it, tell your friends, tell your kids, whomever. So thanks for joining us. Have a great day.